Sure. Before we get into the numbers, I want to point out that we're looking at a proxy when we look at graduation rate. Remember, if you happen to have standards, you can expect that graduation rates will fall below 100%. Some people just can't do the work. So I want to make sure you understand 100% is not the magically correct number. You can manipulate graduation rates by being lax on academics. And in fact, there is plenty of evidence that faculty at for-profits are simultaneously under a lot of pressure to hang on to as many students as possible academically, even though their judgment qua academics may be quite negative about the level of work and the kind of output the student produces. So I want to be very sure that you understand, if you measure them by graduation rates, I can shove a worthless piece of paper in every student's hand very quickly. Some for-profits do that with lightning speed if you have the time and the resources to pay for the credential. But in broad terms, we are looking at graduation rates that hover in the 20% range for the for-profits. Compare that to 60+% for private nonprofits and almost 60% for public institutions. So that's right off the bat an issue. Departure rates are even more ominous because particularly with it's very important for us not to paint with too broad a stroke here. There is variability within each sector. There are plenty of nonprofit institutions that don't do a good job in terms of retaining students, and they ought to do better. And there's some for-profits that are better than others. Some of the most abusive for-profits, we see horrific departure rates. We see departure rates of 80+% year to year, which again supports the theory that heavy sales pressure on the front end reels them in, and then people are not stupid. When they come in, no matter how you've sold them on the experience, once they have the experience, like any other sane person, they try to extricate themselves. And that's, by the way, apropos Jeremy's comment about taking attendance in that very peculiar way, it's because federal law manages what percentage of federal money you've earned based on the date that the student might have stopped attending, that there's a huge game on to hang on to the student for as long as possible, up to the point that the federal money is fully earned, at which point you just have to let go.
May I? I remember when I was at the Art Institutes, the New England Institute of Art, the ad drop period was 2 weeks. So you literally, and that 2 weeks was just 2 classes. So you literally had, from that first class, to decide that if you were going to drop it or not. And then if you attended that second one, that's when you were locked into the balances. So you were, even if you dropped it, you still owed after that point. So you had that one class, and I remember I was actually put into a math class that I felt was too difficult, and I told them I wanted to change it out, to get one that was more, my level, and I was encouraged to stay in it, and they would get me extra help. They were all about getting me that extra help, at least in terms of talk. Once that 2 week rolled by, they just told me, oh yeah, you can withdraw, but you're gonna have to pay for it now.
And I think it's important to recognize too that some of these strategies, I think Alsmudia had talked about this before, that some of these strategies might be things that public sector institutions can learn from, how to encourage students to continue not dropping out so easily or readily. But there's an impact to students in the for-profit sector for staying in and then for dropping out without getting a credential. And maybe if we can turn to that just briefly. Jose, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I just wanted to add some other numbers to what Marmak was talking about. He mentioned 20% graduation rates. That applies to the 4-year sector in the for-profit institutions. You will hear a lot of for-profits say that, in their defense, their graduation rates are much higher for 2-year degree programs, that they are in the order of 60%, and in fact 3 times higher than the average graduation rates for community colleges. There are many things that the community colleges can say as to why that is an unfair comparison, but I would just like to add a couple of the things that the for-profits do not say. They will tell you that they have a 3 times higher graduation rate than community colleges, but they won't tell you that they cost 5 times more than the community colleges, and they won't tell you that there's a 10 times higher probability that if you go to a for-profit 2-year program, you will end up with more than $30,000 in debt. So it's very important that we not only talk about cost and success rates that, as Marmac said, could be easily manipulated in the way that they are defined or presented, but also in the ultimate value for the students that go to these schools and aspire to get a degree from these schools.
I would like to say something too on the recruitment side in terms of students staying in school. Is that a lot of times, well, in order for a student to count as your sale for you to enroll them, they have to print out, sign, and fax in their tax return. And that was where a lot of students got stuck. They couldn't do that. And if a student can't do the problem solving of how do I go and find a computer to print out this, sign it, and then get it faxed in, what are the chances that they're going to make it through 3 or 4 years of college assignments? But that didn't really matter. You're instructed to hound this person over and over again to get that document.
All right, great, thanks. Obviously, we have so much to talk about here. We can't go through every single detail, so hopefully when we get to questions, maybe we can elaborate a little bit more. But why don't we move on to job placement? Again, when students, these are, for the most part, career training institutions, so they're dedicated to a curriculum that is supposed to be preparing students to get a job. What sort of information do we know about students' career prospects and job placement rates at these institutions? Suzanne, do you want to start?
I think this might be a question for Kathy, actually.
Oh, did I have it wrong? Yes, Kathy, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
During my time as a enrollment or a career placement advisor, I was very disturbed to discover that the truth was not something that was valued. The whole idea of what we were supposed to do, what we were supposed to present for our superiors was we were supposed to show that our graduates were working in their field, but that had a very broad interpretation. Basically, anybody who was working in a field that could be somewhat tied to their studies, it would be broadly interpreted that they were working there. I had students that were working in Starbucks that had a graphic design degree, and I was expected to call them up and convince them that they were using their skills 25% of the time if they were creating the menu board, the daily specials. One of the most egregious was a young man who had a game art and design degree, which cost him well over $85,000. And he started school working at Toys R Us. He had been working at Toys R Us for 8 years, and at that point he had worked his way up to $8.30 an hour. And they felt that that was legitimate, that he was working in his field because he was selling video games. And I saw so many examples of this. I was outright taught by a coworker how to manipulate the data, how to change things. I'd like to mention at this point in time that EDMC, I believe, has slandered me in saying that that this was not true, that they held investigations, and in fact even implied that I was the only one there that was manipulating this data. I reported this to my superiors several times, and I was quite vocal about what I saw and how I felt that that was not in the best interest of our students. And it continues to this day. And I think if I walk away from this, if you walk away from this with one message from me, I think one of the most important things that we need in this industry is transparency. We need someone who's actually going to look and make sure that these numbers are accurate. It really wouldn't be that difficult to call these students up and find out if they really are working in their field, and and to have this verified, because this is being used to draw students in. I had students call me up after they were done, they had graduated. I had one student come right out and say to me, "Okay, I'm ready for my job now." He had been told by his admissions person that when he was done, we would give him a job. And that was nowhere near the truth. And then when he found out that he had been lied to, he was, combative with me and didn't want to work with me to learn how to find a job because he had been lied to. He had been told he would have a job given to him. And I just really think that if they're going to charge this kind of money for this school, those who do make it through should have some sort of real service given to them, and there should be accountability as to whether or not those jobs are in their field.
I can just speak to that briefly. I did run into a student of mine, a former student of mine, I don't know, a month and a half ago, and she did have a job. She tore my ticket. She said, theater number 12 is on your left. Enjoy your movie. And she has if she graduated, she has a film and video degree that cost her $94,000. So I'm not sure how long it'll take her to pay that back, but it'll be a while.
I want to comment briefly about the sort of skills that are more likely to be taught at for-profit institutions. There's a difference between know-how skills and know-why skills. So know-how skills teach you how to perform a particular task in a trade, maybe limited to a particular industry. Know-why skills give you more abstract reasoning, understanding of how systems work. Those are the sort of skills that are more easily transportable when markets change, when they constrict, when you have to move into a new field. And for-profits are more likely to teach us know-how skills, whereas traditional institutions, particularly if you're going for a liberal arts education, are going to teach us know-why skills, which can sustain you in the long term. Now again, not everyone can get a degree in economics, right, and understand how larger systems works, but to the extent that we consistently funnel the same segment of our population into areas that only teach them know-how skills, right, based on race or class, particular groups are being funneled into these areas that are not going to give you security long term, we have to question that. Why is it that we're setting up the same groups in our population to go to institutions where they're going to get skills or maybe might not be able to sustain them over the course of their lives?
Just real quick, following that train of thought, and it's also how that funneling occurs, right? We continue to cluster in this country low-income students and students of color in schools where we spend less, where we expect less, where we teach them less, and where we assign them our least qualified teachers. And so if we don't also worry as we're thinking about higher ed and for-profit and whatnot, worry about the K-12 pipeline and how that is complicit in creating this market niche that then results in these catastrophic conditions, then we're not going to be successful. So we really have to think, our policymakers, not only about how to work with the problem that we have right now in the for-profit sector, but also have some preventive care in the K-12 sector to avoid it to begin with.